It surrounds us. It's everywhere. Tonight, you will hear from the people who live and work within these highly active locations, all in the efforts to discover America's most haunted. With your host, ghost hunter and author, Dan Terry.
Good evening, guys and ghouls. I am Dan Terry, your ghost host with the most haunted. But if you'll excuse me, I have got to slide off into a more of a matter of personal interest. Since the 1930s, 325 planes and 1,200 ships have disappeared in an area known as the Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, famous spot. In 1968, an Air Force bomber just disappeared, completely gone. In December of 1945, Flight 19, probably the most famous of all, 5 Navy Torpedo Bombers disappeared, just gone. They reported compass malfunctions, electronic problems, and they even said the sea looked strange. The rescue plane, one of the many rescue planes that went out looking for them, disappeared with 15 men on board, totally gone. In the 1960s, a Coast Guard lieutenant commander named Frank Flynn reported on his ship as he was going through a wall. It sounds like fog, but he called it a gray mass that they had to go through, could not hardly see the light on the other side, a big signal light. And while they were going through this wall of fog, electronic problems, the steam stopped working properly, the compasses weren't working properly. And there's so many more stories like this. And my guest is Bruce Gernon, and I am so honored to speak with him because he has survived the Bermuda Triangle twice. 2 different flights he's been on has had problems out there. His website, electronicfog.com, and electronic fog is what he's referring to as what may be some of the source of the problems out there. We may get into some other stuff here, but this is his opinion, and as a survivor, I'm going to listen to him. He's been on 60 TV documentaries, TV series, radio shows, and he's published 4 books. So let's go right on and talk to pilot Bruce Gernon. Bruce, how you doing today?
Hey, Dan. Oh, fine. Thanks for having me.
Honored you're here, sir. So let's start right out with what happened to you back in 1970 on your first experience out there.
Okay, yeah, it was December 4th, 1970. But I had been flying in the Bahamas for about 5 years before this happened. And I had about 600 hours of flight time. And I had been to almost all the Bahama Islands along with my father. We were searching for land to develop, and then we finally found a location in Andros Island. And we made a deal with the British government, the Parliament. They owned a lot of land in the Bahamas then, and they controlled it all. So we made a deal with them for an island in Andros, and we were developing that. And so I had been flying back and forth from Andros to Palm Beach International in Florida for close to a year. So I was quite familiar with that particular flight pattern. It would go directly from Andros Island. Fresh Creek is the name of the airport. It's right about in the middle of the island on the eastern side, right on the edge of the tongue of the ocean where it drops off to 6,000 feet. And we'd go directly from there to Bimini, which was on the other side of the Great Bahama Bank. It was a large area of shallow water in between Bimini and Andros. And then we'd just make a slight turn to the north and head directly to Palm Beach International, and we'd cross over the Gulf Stream when we did that. And the flight would usually take about an hour and 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the winds. So on this particular day, it was raining in the morning, so we couldn't take off first thing in the morning like we planned. We had to wait for the large area of storms that covered the entire island of Andros Island. And Andros is the biggest island, 110 miles long and 40 miles wide. And we were able to finally go to the airport and pre-flight the plane. It was still raining, but it was just a light mist. And back then you couldn't get a weather report because there weren't any phones on the island. And so it looked like it might be all right. So we took off, and I lifted off at exactly 3 p.m. Back then the time was critical. We would monitor our time because we would fly a lot by what's called dead reckoning. We use the instruments, mainly the compass, and note the time. Mm-hmm. So that we'd be at the right waypoint at the right time. And so we took off, and it took about 10 minutes to cover the interior island of Andros before we reached the ocean and where the Great Bahama Bank is. And it was overcast the whole time, so we were only at 1,000 feet. And when we got close to the shoreline, I could see that it was clear over the ocean. So that looked good. That looked promising. And so we started to ascend at 1,000 feet per minute. And I noticed there was a strange elliptical shaped cloud. It's known as a lenticular cloud, but they usually form only at high altitudes. And this was unusual. It was sort of like it was hovering right over the ocean, about 500 feet above the ocean. It was about a mile long, half mile wide, and 1,000 feet thick. And the winds were light and variable. And so that's why it wasn't moving. And so it looked harmless. It had real smooth edges. And it was kind of unusual looking to be at that low altitude. Usually these clouds only form at very high altitudes or behind mountains. And so I climbed over it, and when I got to an altitude of about 3,000 feet, I was able to contact Miami radio, and they told me the weather was clear in between Andros and Florida. There were some large thunderstorms over South Florida, but he said they were spread out, so we'd probably be able to circumnavigate around them. And so I kept climbing, but then after I finished following the flight plan, I started looking around, studying the weather, and I looked at below me, and this cloud that was real small apparently had spread out, and it was still right below the airplane. And now we're going up to 4,000 feet, and then it caught up to me, and so I had to go into it. And I wasn't in it very long, maybe only 30 seconds, and then I popped out of it and got about 200 feet above it. And apparently it had updrafts. It was building up, and then it caught up to me again. I went back in it. And so I thought, well, maybe this is a cumulonimbus thunderstorm in the birth stage when I could fly over it. But it was much more than cumulonimbus. And I went in and out of the storm maybe 5 times before I finally was able to escape it at 11,500 feet. And then I went into clear blue sky after another 10 minutes. So that's like 20 minutes now we've been flying. I leveled off and started cruising to almost 200 miles an hour. And then when I looked around me, again, I couldn't believe what I was seeing here. It was like this small cloud that we originally climbed over had spread out into apparently a squall. And it was... now it was like maybe 30,000 feet high. And I noticed that it was unusually curved, almost in the shape of a perfect semicircle right behind the airplane. So I was flying away from it, so I kind of forgot about it and kept cruising right on our flight path that we had planned. And then after only a few minutes, I look in front and I look up and here's this huge storm again. And now it's up to maybe 40,000 feet. And again, it's got that curve to it right in front of us. Only the curve is facing the opposite way of the one that was behind us. So I thought, well, maybe I'd fly under it. And then I noticed that it was unusual compared to other storms. It was laying right on the surface of the ocean. So it was too high to climb over, and I couldn't fly under it because it had no ceiling, no base to it. And that seems like related to the story you were just telling about. I think it was the Coast Guard. They ran into a wall of, well, that's what this was. It was a wall of this strange weather. And so I figured, well, I'm maintaining a flight path direct to Bimini. So I kept going to Bimini and staying on the flight path. And so I entered into the storm, and it was kind of unusual that it wasn't raining at all. And the visibility was maybe a couple miles because I could see the ocean. And then as we got in a little deeper, it started flashing. And it was some form of lightning that I'd never seen before. Instead of bolts of lightning, it was just flashes.
Okay.
And then it got really dark. And so it got to the point where I couldn't see anything when the flashes weren't going off. And then when they went off, I could see the ocean below me. So it got too intense with the electricity. So I veered off and went back to the south and headed along the edge of this storm. And so now, let's see, we've been flying for close to 27 minutes or so. So, excuse me. So I flew along the southern edge of this curved storm, looking for a way to fly around it. And in the meantime, I contacted Miami Radio again and told them that I was confronted with this storm, so I'm deviating from my flight path, and I'm going to head south, see if I can fly around it. And the air traffic controller acted real calm and said, oh, yeah, no big deal. Yeah, just let them know when we get around it. And so I'm looking for a place to go around it, and then I noticed that it seems to connect to the storm that we had just escaped from behind us. And so it's like, well, now what? But then I noticed that two ends of this storm were meeting. So apparently it started off at Andros, and this cloud spread out in the form of a circle. And then it connected on the opposite end. I've got a name for this particular type of storm that may become well known someday in the future. I call it a circular vortex squall. And it could be methane gas that has something to do with the formation of this storm, because the way it ignited with the atmosphere was not normal. Mm-hmm. Although it looked like a normal storm, there were parts of it that didn't appear to be normal. So it could be like a giant circular puff of methane oozing out of the earth and then igniting with the surface and igniting really fast, because it would, for it to start at Andros and then spread out and meet on the other end, it would have to be going almost 300 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be a 300 mile an hour wind. It would be a 300 mile an hour ignition, the way the whole thing ignited almost at once. And so it connected on the bottom. So apparently it looked like a big valley at first. Mm-hmm. So it was aiming right toward Miami, and there was blue sky on the other side. So I figured, well, okay, I'll just shoot through that opening there. And then I'm aiming for the opening, and now it's like 29 minutes had passed. And so it took me about a minute to dive down because it was at 10,000 feet. And then I noticed that it formed on the bottom first, but then up at the top where it didn't form, these two ambleheads started coming together on the top. And the ambleheads are normal, but they rarely connect.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not abnormal. That happens. And so it formed a tunnel in between the two storms. So first, the tunnel was probably over 1,000 feet wide in diameter. And I'm aiming down at it I increased the speed to the red line, 220 miles an hour. And so when I entered the tunnel, now it had reduced down to maybe 300 feet or more. And this is when something incredible happened inside the tunnel. The tunnel was clear. I could see from one end to the other. And so exactly 30 minutes had passed of my flight time when I entered it. And once I entered it, something immediately happened. These strange clouds formed along the walls of the tunnel, and they were hovering a few feet above the walls, and they were in a line. So they formed a line that just went around and around in a counterclockwise method all the way to the other end of the tunnel. And it was really strange to see it immediately formed right in front of my eyes. And in the meantime, the tunnel's getting smaller and smaller. And so, well, it ended up, I was only in that tunnel for about 20 seconds. And that tunnel was about 10 miles long. So it should have taken me at least 3 minutes to reach the other end. And when I reached the other end, another strange thing happened. The tunnel just closed right at the same time I reached it, and the wingtips scraped the edges of it. And I looked behind me and watched it collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the clear blue sky, but then the clear blue sky immediately turns grayish colored. And I feel the sensation of zero gravity, which was really strange because I also felt like I was hydroplaning going forward at an incredible rate. And I've never had that feeling before. Then that lasted about 10 seconds. And so then I'm still at 10,000 feet and cruising 220. I started to slow down because everything looked strange, and I slowed down to the maneuvering safety speed of 180 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And looked at my instruments to make sure I was probably 90 miles east of Miami, because just before we went into the tunnel, I was 100 miles east of Miami. And so I should be 90 miles. So I look at the instruments and I couldn't verify that I'm 90 miles because the compass is slowly rotating counterclockwise, and the electronic navigational instruments are all going haywire. So I was able to contact the Miami radio again, and I guess they could tell I wasn't sure what's going on. I'm in the same position right now as Flight 19 was.
Yeah.
And not only that, it's almost exactly 25 years later, less one day, the same exact time, 3:30 in the afternoon. And I say the same thing almost to the controller. I'm not sure of where I am. Everything looks strange. And the guy comes back, he's real calm and cool and says, okay, I'll check you out on radar. And then he couldn't find me on radar.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a transponder radar instrument that was supposed to help us, but that was probably going haywire too. And so he couldn't help us. And at that point, my dad went into a panic, and my passenger, we had a business partner passenger, he became nauseous.
I see that.
He couldn't even speak properly. He was so bad. And I told the radar controller, well, we'll just keep flying. So I flew the airplane, kind of using a compass that I had built into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And, maintained the same heading and never made any turns. And then, like 3 minutes later, after we entered the tunnel, he comes back on the radio, and now he's all excited because apparently they knew we were in trouble.
Right.
And he says, I got an airplane directly over Miami Beach. And I checked my watch, 33 minutes. No, I'm probably 80 miles east, you know. And I was looking for the Bimini Islands. I never saw them because there's a chain of islands. I should have flown right over them. He says, are you sure? And then I said, yeah, but then something incredible happens again. This fog, I call it electronic fog. And it electronically dissipated. And what happened was, it's hard to explain how these big lines first formed parallel to the direction of our flight. And then they cracked open. The lines cracked open very slowly. It took about 10 seconds for them to crack all the way open. And then that was blue sky on the other side of the lines, the cracks. And then they're gone in 10 seconds. And I looked at Miami and I said, wow. He said, you're right, I'm over Miami. And then I looked back behind me expecting to see this huge fog bank.
Right.
And it was crystal clear as far as you could see. There was no fog bank. So I couldn't understand that. But anyway, after that, we flew to Palm Beach International. And I landed there and then checked the time, and it was like a 47-minute flight. And I was like, oh, that doesn't make sense either. It should take closer to 80 or 90 minutes.
Right.
And we didn't talk about it for a whole year because it was unexplainable. But I worked on it every day to memorize what had happened, because I knew that there was something important maybe that had happened. So I didn't want to forget it.
Right. Sure.
Where my dad and the business partner, they kind of forgot it, but never entirely. They knew something incredible had happened. Even the business partner, many years later, his grandchildren came to me after I had my books out, and they had heard about it. They said, you're the guy that was my granddad used to always talk about. You were in the plane, something incredible happened. And granddad used to say that whenever he looked at his watch, it would be spinning.
Wow.
Spinning. I thought that was like a joke at first, but then it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe he was seeing time flying. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because he was nauseous, it looked like it was spinning, and it really was.
Bruce, there is so much in that story to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on the idea that it was almost from one day shy of being exactly 25 years after the same thing happened to another set of airplanes?
Well, I would call that a time correlation.
Okay.
They experienced at the same time as me the exact same thing with the electronic fog. But they didn't fly through the tunnel. It's like I'm, right now anyway, the only living person that's actually flown through one of these tunnels.
Okay.
But my theory is that those tunnels, and I've seen many of them, they usually only last about 3 minutes,
Okay.
plus or minus. And when they collapse, they emit like a spear, a puff of what I've termed electronic fog. And similar to other fogs, this fog can last for hours. And what it can do is, dependent on the winds, it can just stay where it's at and drift around. Or if there's updrafts, it could go up real high, 30, 40,000 feet. Or if downdrafts, it could go down to earth and settle right above the surface. And so that's what Flight 19 and many other planes and boats have run into. They encountered the electronic fog. And then it has different intensities too. I've categorized it in 5 different intensities. And I believe there's a lot of people that have gone through the intensity number 1, which would just be a light haze.
Okay.
And visibility would still be a few miles, and it wouldn't affect your instruments or anything like that. So it doesn't really affect anything besides what you're seeing. So they just think it's a light haze, and they don't know that it's attached to it. See, that's part of my theory. That's the other part of my theory, is that it attaches to the airplane. See, that took me 30 years to understand that, by thinking about it every day. It's like how did I get from, once I left the tunnel, what happened? Why didn't I see anything when I flew at least 90, almost 100 miles and didn't see anything? And then all of a sudden the fog disappeared, and then I couldn't see it behind me. So that's an indication right there that it was attached to us. And there's been lots of pilots that have been in it and died because of it. Like Flight 19,
Right.
they didn't realize it would attach to them. So I mean, it was probably like the same category as mine. I would call mine a category 4 that I was in.
Okay.
In the Bahamas, where it affects your instruments. It blurs your vision, where it's a real strange thing when you're in it. Your visibility almost appears like it's good, but then you can't make out hardly anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because you're in this sphere and you're looking at the sphere. It could be maybe a couple hundred yards away from you, and you're looking at the edge of it, and it's like it's really strange. And that's why Flight 19 made a lot of strange comments. I mean, the Navy didn't copy any of those comments. They tried to keep it real straight, but the ham radio operators have picked up a lot of strange comments that they were making.
Right.
And one that they don't advertise is that all their compasses were going out, or all 5 of them. The Navy tries to say only one of them, the commanders, and it was all of them, because at one point the commander, they were complaining that he didn't know where he was going, so he says, "Okay, who wants to take over?" So he let one of the other guys take over.
Sure.
And he couldn't figure out where to steer either.
So much going on with this. When a regular squall in the ocean or storm hits that high up, have you ever heard or seen of a tunnel going through the clouds before like that?
Oh, I've seen many of them.
Even in a regular storm?
Yeah, most of them are in storms. The one I was talking about, this circular vortex squall. That apparently, I mean, it could be methane gas, because it was not a normal thunderstorm at all. And the other ones that are more normal but still rare, I call a thunderstorm vortex tunnel, or you could call it a time storm.
Okay.
It will be the same thing. It's a thunderstorm vortex tunnel. And in other words, it's a thunderstorm with a tunnel that inside the tunnel, it's slowly spinning.
Mm-hmm.
That's the vortex.
Okay.
So I've seen many of them over the Everglades, especially over the Everglades. And I've even experienced the electronic fog over the Everglades.
I was going to ask, you said it happened in 1996 again?
Yeah, 96. And I still didn't have my theory of how it attaches to you. So I was living in the Keys, and I took off from the Keys in the morning. And the night before, there was a lot of thunderstorms. So I speculate that the electronic fog formed between some of these thunderstorms. And then it got calm and later in the night, and then the electronic fog settled down lower. Because they usually form, the tunnels usually form around 10,000 feet. And so when I took off from my airport, another neighbor that I knew was returning to the airport. And I had a conversation with him, but mostly it was another neighbor that had a conversation with him. And the neighbor got on the radio with him, and he said to him, "What are you coming? How come you're coming right back? I thought you were going to Tampa."
Uh-huh.
And he sounded kind of nervous. He said, "I was going to Tampa, but when I got over the Everglades, all of a sudden this fog got all around me, and it went as far as I could see. And I didn't want to fly anywhere near it, so I just turned around and I'm coming right back home." So then I contacted him on the radio. I said, "Carl, what are you talking about? I don't see any fog." He says, "Yeah, there's all kinds of fog out there." And then I said, What do you mean?" And then he wouldn't talk back to me. And this guy usually talked like too much on the radio.
Okay.
I realized then something might be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured, well, I can't believe that there's fog, because I got a weather report and they said it was fine.
Right.
Yeah. So as soon as I got over the Everglades, I flew over Florida Bay. And then as soon as I got out of the Everglades, the fog immediately forms right below the airplane. And I thought, well, it must be some sort of a ground fog that just happened to come up. And it's harmless. But then I started thinking, well, I got to go all the way to Palm Beach, and I better make sure that Palm Beach isn't socked in too, because I didn't have a lot of extra fuel in case I couldn't land at Palm Beach. And so I contacted the actual weather bureau in Miami, and I asked them, well, how extensive is this fog? Because I got to go all the way to Palm Beach.
Yes.
And he says, fog? He said, "What fog?" I said, "All this fog all around me over the Everglades, as far as I can see." He says, "What?" He says, "There's no fog reported anywhere in Florida." I said, "What?" "It's all around me." He said, "No." He said, "There's no fog out there." So I said, "Okay, what am I going to do now?"
Yeah.
And my wife was with me, and she started getting real nervous. And I even started getting a little nervous because I was older then. I didn't get nervous on the first incredible flight because I was kind of like a macho man, only 23 years old. But now I'm like, what, 40 or something? And I'm getting nervous here. It's like,
Right.
So I just got like a hunch. And maybe it's because when I reached the shoreline of Miami back in 1970, the fog detached.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, I'm over the land. I said, I'll head for the ocean. So I made a sharp turn to the right and started heading east toward the ocean. And then I looked below the plane, and there's a hole in the clouds, in the fog, right below the airplane, about 30 feet in diameter or so. And I'm looking through the hole, and I can see the Everglades below us.
Mm-hmm.
And the Everglades is moving same speed as the airplane, 180 miles an hour. I'm at 1,500 feet. And I said, well, wait a minute now. This just doesn't make sense. I didn't have my theory then.
Okay.
I didn't know that this fog was attached to the airplane. And so I'm looking through a hole below the airplane, and the hole's moving with the airplane. And I figured, well, this got to be just some sort of meteorological phenomenon going on here. And that made me even more nervous, I guess. But so anyway, I noticed that while we're heading for the ocean, now the hole is starting to get bigger.
Okay.
So I started to get a little relieved. Now I said, oh, that's a good sign. And so it got bigger and bigger and bigger until it spread out, like on either side of us, it was all clear, except a ring around the airplane, completely around the airplane.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, what the heck is that ring? And I wonder if all the other pilots are seeing that ring, because it gives you an illusion when you're in this. I thought maybe the ring was 2-3 miles away from me.
Okay.
But it was more probably like 200 or 300 yards away from me. And it was like the leftover from the electronic fog. So this would be like a category 2 that I'm in, because it didn't affect my instruments. But it was real strange the way it dissipated. Again, it was an electronic dissipation, not normal at all compared to regular meteorology. And then the ring stayed with me all the way back to Palm Beach. And then another strange thing was when you look through the ring, it would be like wherever you were looking at would be separated. Like kind of like adjusting a lens on a graphic lens. Until you get it adjusted when it was out of focus. I mean, it was not out of focus. It just had a kink in whatever you looked at, other clouds or down high-rise buildings in Miami. Or strange. And I think that was similar to the tunnel in the Bahamas. I was seeing the fabric of space-time.
Okay.
When I was experiencing this. And that ring stayed with me all the way to Palm Beach, and it didn't disappear until the wheels touched down.
At the risk of sounding kind of weird here, did it seem on both occasions like this thing was intentionally trying to swallow you up the first time, trying to go with you the second time? Did it seem like it had some kind of intelligence to it?
Well, maybe the first time it may have. It was really, really strange. And people have suggested that to me, that I caused it. Even one expert told me, but I can't believe I caused it.
Yeah,
I instigated it somehow. If it was the methane gas, maybe the vibration of the airplane.
I was going to say, I don't think you could instigate something of a natural phenomenon if it is, and it sounds like it.
Right.
Just one we haven't come across yet. And again, I'm going to kind of go off on left field here, but back in the 40s, there was a weird fog said by witnesses during the Philadelphia experiment when they had different electromagnetic fields moving around the ship in an effort to make it invisible to the naked eye. Could this electromagnetic energy also have been the cause of the fog you was into?
Yeah, the same as the Philadelphia experiment. That was like man-made, synthetic fog. That could be the same as the natural fog. I believe this fog, especially the ones that form in the Everglades, it definitely is part of nature.
It just, wow, that sounds crazy. I've seen on some of the shows that you're on where they recommend or suggest sunspots cause some of this. Did that ever make any sense to you, or magnetite?
Well, it could be a little bit of the magnetite, especially the island of Bermuda is loaded with magnetite, but not so much in the Bahamas, but it is there. But there's supposed to be more methane gas, and probably especially over the Great Bahama Bank. That's one of the largest banks in all of the Caribbean, with shallow water. So that could be where this methane could burst out of that, and then ignite with the atmosphere and cause a large squall. I call it a circular vortex squall.
When you say ignite, now there's places that have huge garbage dumps that actually burn the methane off as it comes up to the surface. Is that the kind of ignite you're talking about?
Yeah, there could be a relationship there. That ignites the surface, so it could be a natural cause.
So would that make that more of a smoke than a fog? Or are we talking about a weather condition here?
Well, the one in the Bahamas was different than a typical thunderstorm like over the Everglades.
Okay.
I could say it's more like a gas.
All right.
That I was flying over and through and around.
Okay.
Compared to a regular thunderstorm, there's no gas in that.
Commander Flynn in the 60s said that no matter how high they put that spotlight up, they could not see the top. They could see the stars above it, but they could not see the top of the wall of what he called a gray mass. So would that be one type of the same phenomenon?
Yeah, that may be the one with the gas.
Okay.
It's ignited with the atmosphere, and it causes an unusual, I guess you could call it a storm, but it's a very unusual one.
It's incredible. And during this, was there anything going on around you, any paranormal, anything that would suggest something different?
No, not really. Just the storm was over the Bahamas. The way it laid on the ocean was, I don't know if you call that paranormal, but
I'd say off the top of my head from what you're saying, it's a natural thing we haven't figured out yet.
It could be. Of course, they say aliens could be involved with it too. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess you're not falling into that idea too much.
No, I am falling into it because 1 month after I had this experience, I took off at night at 9 o'clock at night from Palm Beach with a girlfriend because it was a perfect night, good night for flying, no clouds, no anything, calm. And so I went up to 10,000 feet, which is kind of unusual. It's almost like fate is guiding me on this. And it's like, so then I get over in Miami, and we're looking at the incredible lights of the city of Miami. And so then I make a turn out toward the ocean. And so then I fly due east. And then I get about 5 miles offshore. And at that point, everything is black.
Okay.
It was a dark night, and the ocean's calm. So I couldn't really see the horizon, or could see maybe some of the stars up high. But anyway, we were looking way out to the east, and maybe it was as far as Bimini, and we see this strange orange light. Kind of reminds me of the story of Columbus. I always say he saw this light, and the orange light. It was like bobbing around. And I'm going, whoa, that's doing some strange maneuvers. What the heck is that? And so we both saw it, and I pointed it out to my girlfriend. Yeah, she was amazed.
Right.
So then all of a sudden, the thing just shoots right toward us at incredible speed. And it got to the point where it took up the whole windshield. That's how close it was to me.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was the end. I was going to die. And because it looked metallic. It was glowing orange, but it had a dome on the top, saucer shape. Must have been over 200, maybe 300 feet in diameter, maybe 60 feet thick. And so I made a sharp turn off to the left, going with the torque of the airplane as sharp as I could, and thinking at the same time, okay, this is the end. And then nothing happened, so I level off, and so I look around and it's gone. But anyway, it was a flying saucer. And now I find out that there's an area at 10,000 feet between Miami and Bimini, where there's been a lot of strange things happening there. And some airline pilots told me that whenever they get into that area, it could be like a runway for UFOs or something like that.
Okay.
Part of their traffic pattern. And so that lenticular cloud that I saw just offshore of Andros, there could have been a mothership inside of it. And it was cloaked with a cloud.
So is it possible this cloaking field might be what you flew into then? Or you think that's a different situation?
I don't know for sure, but maybe the thing just took off right after I got over on top of it. I just happened to be near its flight path, and the thing departed Earth. It was a big one, a mothership. I mean, this thing was a mile long, so it could have been 3/4 of a mile long, this mothership. Kind of like that Ukazumi, whatever it was that recently went into Earth orbit, solar orbit, penetrated it, and upset a lot of people. Some of the scientists say it might have been a mothership, and it's huge. So imagine when one of those things departs Earth, it's going to do some shaking up. And it was in the most remote part of almost all the Bahamas.
Okay.
At the time, there was absolutely no civilization within 50 miles of where it was located.
That's incredible. And they are now saying you are the expert for the electronic fog phenomenon. So
thanks. They gave me credit for coining that term. And now I've got a couple more: the thunderstorm vortex tunnel, or time storm. I've seen many of them and photographed them. I'm going to be showing them on YouTube. I'm making some YouTube videos now.
Okay.
Doing one at a time. Eventually, I'm going to try to expose everything I know. In the meantime, I'm kind of holding off on an actual video of a time storm.
Okay.
It's taken at sundown, right after sundown, after sunset. The sun went down, and it was 2 thunderstorms had come together. Actually, 3, and one of them formed a beautiful, awesome time tunnel, or that's another word your kid call it, instead of a vortex tunnel. The scientists would rather call it a vortex tunnel than a time tunnel. And it's about 5 miles long, and I get this one really cool photograph where the third storm way over to the side, and it's almost dark out there. It shoots a big bolt of energy or lightning right inside it. And it's way over probably a mile or 2 away from the storm that has the tunnel, but they're all kind of connected into one big storm, and it ignites the storm tunnel real bright.
Yeah.
And yet the lightning is way over to the other side of the tunnel. So somehow it went to the far side. without really seeing any light. It's almost like what do they call that new form of energy that can travel from one place to the other instantly.
I don't know that one, but you've got some interesting stuff here. Where can people find your videos and your book?
Well, my latest book was created by Amazon, so I'm real happy with the way it turned out because it's the first one that's available in hardcover or softcover, and it's loaded with color photos.
Okay.
And some of the photos I was just talking about with the vortex tunnel and the time storm in the Everglades, and I've got that on a video that I haven't shown yet. So that's the YouTube, the beginning of my YouTube venture. And
Okay.
not too good at it yet, but I'm hoping maybe a professional producer may come along and work with me to create a really a good one, good video for YouTube. But we'll see.
So if folks on YouTube get on YouTube and type in Bermuda Files or electronic fog, they should be able to reach your page.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it'll come right up to do that.
All right. Bruce, why would you even go back into the sky after the first time when this happened?
Oh, after the first time?
Yeah.
Well, back then nothing scared me. So yeah, I kept going, no problem.
Okay.
But then I became a real cautious pilot after that. Yeah, real cautious.
Very few old, bold pilots, huh?
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, Bruce Gernon, thanks for coming on. We're running out of time, but you've been amazing. And this has really got me thinking on the stuff I read from Charles Burletts or so many other people who's wrote about this.
Okay, yeah, I hope there's like students of science get my new book. It's kind of directed toward them because I need help to try to solve this thing. I mean, it may take 100 years to solve it. And I mean, I've been working on it for 53 years, so that leaves 47. So there's a lot of things to be discovered, and the student scientists are the ones that are going to help to discover this incredible power of electronic fog.
Well, I say you've given them a really big first step to start in. So, Bruce, thanks again, and take care of yourself up there.
All right, you too. Good day.
All right, take care. I think after the first time, and maybe it's just I'm not an old, bold pilot, I would come up with the idea that that cloud was trying to swallow me and I'm out of here. So give him credit. He's an incredibly brave man, much braver than I would be. Hey, friends, I want to remind you to subscribe to the UNX Network, unxnetwork.com, free subscription. Go to the front page down a little bit, and there's a box there for free subscription. What do you get? Just by putting your email into that box. Monthly UNX newsletter, access to the X blog, and there's so much going on the X blog right now. It's incredible. And of course, a free digital copy of the UNX magazine. The newest one's incredible. Got a great story about giants and a few others. The guy who wrote the giant story, though, is just amazing. He's pretty wild. So I also want to remind you real briefly, we do have the XCon in Kansas City area coming up really, really fast. That's going to be October 13th, 14th, and 15th. I'll be speaking on the 13th. Got some of the best people in all of these fields, be it UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, some of the best coming through here. Got some videos to show you. It's really amazing. So come in, check it out, get on and buy tickets for the XCon if you're in the Kansas City area or you just want to come check out these incredible people. And I see my time's about up, so I'm going to leave you all with my normal words. Stay spooked. All right. Good night, people.